Months, yes. People, the candidate is to hard.
Sorry, everyone. Sorry. Hello. Hello. Could I have your attention, please? Thank you. I know we're to start this at 6 o'clock, but unfortunately, Dublin traffic. Thank you to all the people who got here on time, but we are going to wait another 5 minutes for the other candidates to arrive. So if anyone wants to go out and use any of the facilities here, you can do so now. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Is there more candidates out there? Is there?
Yeah.
Is there more candidates?
Yeah, there is a few out there.
Clare and Ciaran, if you just take a seat here in the front, thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, sorry, we have a short film to show. As soon as everyone's settled, we'll get the film started.
Eunice?
Carmela Mahagat. Okay. Okay, I think we'll close the door then. Okay.
I don't know if you should do that because people will be going in and out.
So I'm going to introduce everyone. I'm very, very sorry for the late start, and we'll try and we're not going to catch up time. And I do understand if people have to leave, that's fine. I accept your apologies in advance. So I'm going to introduce you to Ethel Buckley. She's no stranger to some people in the room, but for those who don't know, Ethel is the Deputy General Secretary of SIP2, our union. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mary. And the reason why we're starting late is that some of the candidates arrived a bit after the time and we were waiting on some other people to turn up. But thanks to the candidates who were here on time. So I just want to start by telling everybody that this event is being live streamed on the Respect at Work campaign website. So both the comments of the candidates and the questions that are asked of the candidates are going to be live streamed and then they'll stay on that website. So just to bear that in mind. So I wanted to start by thanking the Communication Workers Union for accommodating us tonight. We had to move because the room we had in the Teachers' Club wasn't large enough for the interest in the event. So that's a good thing, I think. And particular thanks to Sarah and Imelda for all of the work for getting the venue ready for us. I'm going to make some opening remarks just to kind of set the scene for this particular hustings. This is the third trade union hustings now. We started in Ireland South in Cork on Monday night, and then we moved to Midlands Northwest last night to Galway, and the final one is here in Dublin. And I suppose what we are really saying to the candidates at these hustings is that this is very much a trade union hustings. And we understand that you do lots of them and that there are lots of issues come up at the hustings, but at this particular one, we really want to focus on workers' rights and issues that are of concern and interest to all of the trade unionists that are in the room, okay? That's not a kind of a curtailing what you're going to say, but really it would be very helpful if you answered the particular questions of the trade unionists. And the hustings are organised jointly by SIP2 and by the Irish Congress of Trade Unions. And it's great that Jerry McCormack is here from the Irish Congress of Trade Unions. Jerry was recently appointed to a new role in the movement, which is the European officer. So for the people who do get elected as MEPs, you're going to be interacting a lot with Jerry McCormack on behalf of the Irish movement. The other thing to say is that the candidates have all been advised in advance that the event was going to be filmed, and we've asked everyone else not to film at the event because that can be, you know, a bit off-putting and disruptive for people. When the event is over, the unions are going to share the meeting with activists. so as to inform them as to how they might want to cast their vote on the 7th of June. So just to say that to you as well. So you're going to actually be speaking to a very large number of people, not just the number of people that are in the room tonight. There's 100 people in the room tonight. They're the senior representatives of the movement in Dublin. But say in SIP2 alone, we have 58,000 members in this constituency, and the other unions have many thousands more. So that's the reach, I suppose, of the event, potentially. And we wanted to say that with the EU directive on adequate minimum wages due for transposition in November, we really want to focus on that directive at this meeting. Now, the directive is called the Minimum Wages Directive, but there is a statutory minimum wage in Ireland. There are statutory minimum wages in Ireland. And so the minimum wage aspects of the directive are not the real concern of the Irish trade union movement. The real concern of the Irish trade union movement is Article 4 on the right to organise a union in the workplace and on expansion of collective bargaining rights and coverage. That's the really important topic for us that we want you to discuss. And we really want to be clear that what we want from you is a very clearly stated position on the transposition of the directive. And then if you were to get elected to the European Parliament, how will you support an effective national action plan in Ireland next year? Because the national action plan needs to be agreed by the social partners in 2025. This directive and the potential of it is so significant to private sector workers in Ireland, who, you know, Ireland is an outlier in the European Union insofar as there is no statutory route to union recognition, even where all of the workers in a workplace want to be represented by a union. The only avenue for that in Ireland currently is strike. Go to the Labour Court and then go on strike. Some workers want to do that, some workers don't want to do that. Other European countries, people have legal routes to getting recognition when people want to unionise. That's one thing. But we're also an outlier, and this isn't often said, but we want to be really clear about it in the Respect at Work campaign, that Ireland is one of only 2 countries in the European Union, us and Cyprus, where there is no law to stop a union activist from being sacked for trade union activity. There is an Unfair Dismissals Act in Ireland, but it kicks in after the dismissal has taken place. And it's not punitive on employers anyway, and there's redress, not even compensation. So we'd love to hear your views as well on bringing Ireland into line with European norms on protecting people who are organising their workplace into a union. And when I talk about the Respect at Work campaign, it's important to say that that's a joint inter-union campaign of unions that organise in the private sector. This union here, the Communication Workers Union, Mandate Trade Union, the Financial Services Union and SIP2. And we also have the support of the Union of Students in Ireland and the Irish Secondary School Students' Unions, and other unions are starting, their executives are starting to vote to support the campaign as well. The other big topic of tonight, and it doesn't get spoken about much in Ireland, but it is rampant in this constituency, is union busting, is the targeting of people who are trying to unionise their workplace, for employers targeting them for victimisation, discrimination and dismissal, sacking. There's no law against that either. So we'd love to hear your views on that too, because we think there should be laws, like in other European countries. And we're going to show you a film about union busting, actually, and we want you to react to the film. Just finally, I might say the other thing that's rampant in this constituency, as in the other 2 constituencies, is low pay. Low pay is endemic in Dublin. Over 1 in 5 workers is officially categorised as low paid less than the median wage. And of course, that is a problem for the worker themselves, but it's also a problem for their families and communities. It's also an economic issue because it bleeds resources from the local economy, and it means that the national economy subsidises low-road employers, really. So you might comment as well maybe on low pay as we go through the meeting. Okay, so final thing I'm going to say is the trade union movement generally is very concerned about the polls that are showing a drag to the right from the centre, I suppose, in European politics, and what looks like a significant move to the right in the new Parliament. We think that's very concerning. I think we're also concerned about who will become the next President of the Commission. And definitely the trade union movement would have a view that the position taken by the current president on Israel in particular makes her unfit to be the next president. And of course, one of the people running against her, there's a number of good people running against her, but one of the people is Nicholas Schmidt, who was the co-rapporteur of this directive that we're going to talk about tonight. And he worked very closely with the Irish trade union movement in the development of that directive. So just to say that. So that's it. Just setting the scene that it's a trade union hustings, workers' rights hustings, primarily. And I'm going to hand back now to the Honorary President, Sip2 Mary O'Sullivan.
Okay, thank you, Ethel. Well, once again, I want to thank all of our candidates who came here tonight. So we have Daithí, Doolan, and we have Sinead, Gibney, Social Dems, and we have Ciaran, Cuffe, Green, we have Clare, Daly, Independent, and we have Brid Smith, who's People Before Profit. Yes?
I'm afraid I have to leave. There's a voting block being called on it all now.
Okay.
We have a motion today on neutrality, so I can't really...
Okay, that's okay. We'll send you the video, Brid, is what we'll do. We'll send it to your office, yeah. Yeah, thank you. Aodhan, do you?
Yeah, thanks very much.
Okay. And Brendan Ogle's independent, and we have Aodhan or Riordain, who is Labour. Now, we have other people, as you know, that Lynn Boylan was to attend, and Regina Doherty was all to attend. Now, as far as we know, they're in Dublin traffic. We're not actually sure. We didn't have a contact with them. Now, we did also have apologies from Barry Andrews. So, Barry, I'll just give you a quick mail. He did try to be here. He wasn't able to shift another meeting, but he says to Ethel that he hopes he finds you well, Ethel, and that he said that his colleagues Elaine O'Mara and Nicola Jones have been in contact with him over the last couple of days. Okay, and as I've already stated, he's very, very sorry he can't be here. And unfortunately, when the date was set, he had a prior meeting. But what I will come down to is the core of the message is that he does take workers' rights extremely seriously. And he's been a vocal advocate for the forced labour regulation and co-negotiator of the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, a two-piece legislation that will protect and improve workers' rights in the EU and around the globe. And further to this, he signed the ICTU manifesto for the European election 2024, and if elected, promised to be champion to these pledges over the next 5 years. So I think it's important to state that, because he did try to be here. So I am going to go over again the ground rules, because I absolutely appreciate you taking the time here today, and I wanted for it to be a safe space as well here for all of you. So I just wanted to say to people from the audience that stick to the message is union, no personal attacks, and anyone who is speaking from the floor, I need to know your name and what union that you represent. And also to Ethel did state that we are videoing the meeting, and there is a live stream going out as well. So be mindful of that, please. And the other thing I have got to say to you, right, a lot of you will want to speak, but I don't want a rant and a chant. I just want a straight question that there can be replied to. Okay, thank you. So with that in mind, I think that we'll actually go to the film. So the film is a 3-minute film, and ask you to take cognizance of it. Thank you.
We all receive our deliveries every day, and we don't really see what goes on behind the scenes.
Tom is a delivery worker. It's not his real name. And in the following interview, he asked us to hide his face and change his voice. His crime? Trying to organise a trade union. in his workplace.
We were all just above minimum wage, and you could be expected to work 12 to 15 hours a night. I've seen people being sacked for not knowing how to do tasks that they had received no training for. Staff were being shouted at, screamed at by managers, really aggressively getting up into their faces, because everybody knew that there was nobody there to stand up for you.
Ireland has the weakest workers' rights in Western Europe. This leaves people like Tom prey to cynical employers who drive down their terms and conditions and even sack them when they try to fight back.
So when we mentioned the union, like, people were buying into it. We got 15, 20 lads, no problem, straight up to a meeting. And the lads actually elected me as their rep. You know, and I was delighted because we all got on so well together.
For Tom and his colleagues, coming together and trying to organise a union should have been the start of things getting better. Instead, it was the start of a new wave of victimisation.
A line manager came up to me and he said, listen, head office won't tolerate unions around here. So I arrived for work as normal, and I was just loading the cage, and next of all the manager called me in to the office, said they wanted to speak to me. I went in, there was 2 managers there, and they told me that I was gone, I was sacked.
Tom's boss never gave him a reason for his sacking, but he never needed one. Tom knew why. He was sacked for organising the union.
I'm not unique. This isn't just my story. This is happening to workers right across Ireland. We need laws in this country so that workers like me are protected.
Politicians have allowed Ireland to become a wild west of low pay, poor conditions and insecurity. If you believe that workers like Tom should be protected at work, join our campaign and demand an end to union busting for good.
Now, in view of the time, I'm actually just going to go straight into questions from the floor in relation to that. So I'll take you, if you just state your name and what union you represent. Thank you.
Thank you. Ian McCardle, Deputy General Secretary of the Communication Workers Union. Just a couple of very brief comments. Delighted that CW is delighted to host this event. Delighted that the candidates are here this evening for what is a workers' rights hustings. So it's great to have you here. You're all very welcome. I'd also like to express thanks and appreciation to SIP2 and to the Irish Congress of Trade Unions for putting the event on. A massive amount of work has gone into this event, and indeed to the events in Cork and Galway that have already taken place. Just in relation to the video, I mean, that's one of our reps, Communication Workers Union rep. Very much a recent experience, very much a real lived experience. And people will often wonder, the Deputy General Secretary of SIP2 said at the start in her introduction that union busting is rampant. And a lot of people will say rampant and question whether that's the case or not, because it's not really heard of. It's not really talked about. You don't read it in the media all that often. It tends to be seen as very much an American phenomenon. The fact is, it is widespread. And it's the most effective tool the employers have if they want to kill an organising campaign. Tom was doing fantastic work for the CW, organising his colleagues, had just been in for a review on his performance in the workplace, got a 5-star review. And soon after that, he kind of made it known that he was in the union. He felt safe, he felt secure, and then he was sacked. Now, we took the case, we won the case, he got money. As part of that process, he had to sign a non-disclosure agreement, which prevented him from discussing it in the media. It took a lot of persuasion to get Tom to make that video. That's why you do not hear about union busting in the way that it happens, to the extent that it happens, and how insidious and effective it is at killing union organising in the workplace. Tom was basically brought to an office, sent home. He had to go and find another job, find a way to pay the bills. So it's a very real experience, very much a lived experience. And I guess my question to the candidates is, we have the Adequate Minimum Wages Directive, which is going to create opportunities for us to improve workers' rights. But I want to get your reaction to that video and to the phenomena of union busting in this country. Thanks.
Thank you. So I'll go to the panel who'd like to respond. Daithí, you'd like to respond first?
First, I just want to thank the organisers of Short. I'll be as short as I possibly can. Which is important to acknowledge the organisation that was put into tonight, and it's great to be amongst friends and comrades discussing this hugely important issue. Also, this is probably the most important hustings I've done, because it's about bread and butter issues and workers' rights and families and communities. I just want to send apologies on behalf of Lynn Boylan, who can't be here because she's actually in the Sinead. She has a housing bill in front of the Sinead. The government have decided to amend it, and she has to defend it. So in specific in relation to this video, I think it's shocking, but it's probably not surprising to those of us who are union activists. I've been a union activist for many, many years. And I think I have two important cards in my wallet. My membership card is Sinn Féin, and my union card. I'm a member of Unite. They're the two most important things I carry. Because any gains that we make as workers can be undermined or hollowed out or wiped out with a stroke of a pen at the cabinet table. What goes on here in the video is replicated across the city, across the state, because the laws aren't in place to protect people. That's the bad news. The good news, there's nothing normal, natural about what happens in the workplace like this. Union busting is not normal, it's not natural, it's not a natural phenomenon. It's because it's allowed to take place because the people at the cabinet table allow it to take place. That's the bad news. The good news is, with the vote on June the 7th, we can send a very clear message by supporting left-wing and socialist candidates like ourselves. We can send a message to Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. We want progressive politics at local, European level, and in turn at central government level. And we can be those people supporting and policing the directives coming from Brussels, and working with my colleagues like Louise O'Reilly and others in Leinster House to make sure they're transposed properly with teeth and are strong enough to protect and uphold workers like Tom and other people in that workplace. That's why it's important to vote, I think, for parties who can be represented local government, in Europe and in central government, that we can work together to protect and promote workers' rights, and work with our colleagues in the left in Europe to do exactly that. Sinead.
Okay, thanks, Daithí. And before I go to Clare, I want to welcome Regina to our gathering here. Thank you very, very much. And Regina represents the Fine Gael party. Regina, I won't put you on the hotspot because you've just arrived, but I will come back to you at the end of the panel response to our question, and it's in relation to the phenomenon of union busting in Ireland and how relevant it is today, and how widespread it is. So you can probably gather the thoughts from the floor then. Thank you.
I'll be brief, and in advance, apologies. I have to leave at 7:30, which was supposed to be the closing time of this. I have to be somewhere else, so no disrespect to anybody on that. I think, sadly, union busting actually is normal in Ireland. All of the pickets and all of the disputes that we saw around the likes of Lloyd's, Dunn's, Tesco's was all linked to union busting and union avoidance, really. It's par for the course in Ireland now, and there's many different ways to undermine that. The precarity of contracts is a huge part of that. And last year I commissioned a report on how the Adequate Minimum Wage Directive would apply to Ireland and what benefits we might get from that. And I think it was illustrative in that it indicated that while the directive is an opportunity, it's a bit of a toothless vehicle in and of itself. So this isn't a panacea for these problems at all. We can lean on it. It provides for a fact when you are in a situation where the country has less than 80% collective bargaining, the government has to bring in an action plan. Grand, but there's nothing specific at all about what that action plan might be, and no binding targets. So I think the unions organising themselves is critical, and linking it in to other areas of legislation where workers' rights are undermined. So like the part-time workers directive hasn't been transposed properly in Ireland, so Irish workers should have an automatic right to get extra hours once they're there on an existing contract. And when we were in the Dáil, we moved amendments on that. Unfortunately, the government took it out. They said they'd have a review. They didn't have a review. So precarity at work is another way of busting a union, because you can drive people out because they can't afford to stay. So we have to join the dots on that. And I think that's the backdrop. It isn't an accident that there's been a reduction and an undermining of collective bargaining in Ireland. This is policy. this has been a deliberate tactic starting around the Industrial Relations Act and bedded in since then. So while we can rely on laws, and we should, and push for the best we can, it's not a substitute to organising on the ground either, because this is the biggest problem that you face. And I have to compliment people like Joan Collins for moving the bill on deductions at source as well, because giving unions the right to organise, looking at the right to access a workplace, has to be done, to have those rights that people have in other countries to go in, and the unions having the power to organise people. So I think they're very necessary. Thanks.
Thanks, Claire. Over to you, Sinead. Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much, and thanks to everyone for the opportunity to be here today. I'm really delighted to be at this hustings, and I think likewise, I find that video really saddening because it just speaks to the erosion of respect for workers' rights in this country that we've seen over the last number of decades, and a deterioration of the culture of trade unionism that I think so many of us cherish and hold dear here in Ireland. So I think it's something, in terms of this directive, that I would and my party will support a very strong transposition of the directive. As Ethel has said, the minimum wage section of it is largely in compliance here in Ireland, so it really is the focus on collective bargaining. In my last role as Chief Commissioner of the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission, I was happy to support the commissioning of research which actually looked at the backdrop of the constitutionality of collective bargaining here in Ireland, where independent researchers defined that there is no constitutional barrier to the recognition of collective bargaining rights in the Irish legal landscape. So I think it's something that we should be aspiring to at that level. It's not, and I would have major concerns at the moment that the government, as they have done with many directives, will choose to do the least possible to meet their obligations. We should and can strive for a higher level and the highest level of the protection of workers' rights, and move ourselves right from the bottom of that chart in the European Union right to the top in terms of the protection of workers' rights. As an MEP, this will be an absolute priority for me, workers' rights more broadly, but specifically this piece of work which sits within the next 5 years and the mandate of this next Parliament. And I think in terms of the action plan, what we really need to do is look to our neighbouring countries who've done this well, take back best practice as MEPs, and look to our colleagues to really find out how we can do it better in Ireland. I've worked in the private sector, the public sector, and I've worked for myself. And I really, truly value the solidarity that workers get from trade unions and the protections that it can give them. This should not be the experience of any worker in Ireland, where they are afraid to organise, where they are afraid to fight for their own rights as workers. And I'll do everything in my power to make sure that that is no longer the case.
Thanks, Sinead. Brendan, do you want to go next?
Yeah, thanks. Like some others, I'm going to have to leave, I'm afraid, about 7:25. I have a less salubrious hustings than this to get to at 8 o'clock. So you're a particularly welcoming crowd compared to some of the people I expect to meet later. So I'll enjoy this bit. But yeah, thanks for the question. My God, we've so much to do. And when I say we, I'm talking about our class. I'm talking about the working class. And no matter what your entry point to this discussion is, we really are in a bad place, and we've got ourselves, over decades, over our entire history, in fact, in a bad place on workers' rights in this country. I'm not a bit surprised at that video. Not one bit shocked by that video. You could pick tens of thousands of workers in this city and make similar videos to that if they tried to join a union or tried to get into a union. And the reality is the vast majority don't and won't, and are terrified to even use the word union, if they even know what one is. We've got ourselves into a situation where we have tens of thousands of precarious workers, many of whom are young migrant workers coming to our country. They don't understand workers' rights, they don't understand unions, there's no signposting, there's no direction, even a basic thing like printing out a claim form to the Workplace Relations Commission. For me, a trade union official of 25 years, is complicated. The whole situation is a mess. So, as a candidate in this election, and so we'll see how it goes, a first-time candidate, enjoyable so far anyway. There are areas of Europe where we can look to, for example, and workers' rights is one of them. Of course, we know that the European Union is a neoliberal project which is pushing, more and more wealth into the super wealthy. But under that umbrella description, there are, if not best practice, better practice. And the fact that there is wide-scale collective bargaining rights across much of the continent and that there is now a directive which is at least signposting what we should be doing in Ireland needs to be welcomed. So what happens next? What happens when we get into the transposition phase from November? Well, what happens is we need collectively to be better. We need to be better as a working class community. We need to be better as the political parties need to be better. The trade union movement needs to be better. And we need to push whatever this or the next government is harder to have real teeth in how we transpose. It's not good enough to have reporting mechanisms. It's not good enough to simply have aspirations. People are suffering. People are living in poverty. People are being abused. People are being attacked. There's physical and sexual abuse taking place in the workplace among precarious workers. This is a serious issue. It's not just a workers' rights issue. For many of those workers, it's a human rights issue. So it's good that we've been pointed in that direction, and I hope as a class, wherever we are, be in unions, in politics, or wherever we are, we can all come together from next year onwards and do better. We sure need to do better. Thank you.
Thanks, Brendan. Thank you. Aodhan?
Yeah, thanks very much, and again, thanks for the invitation. What I'm going to say to you is very much what I said to IBEC. When I spoke at the IBEC hustings, I spoke about workers' rights, because I think we need to speak about workers' rights not just in forums like this, but everywhere that we go. And there's a reason why, people say it's 23%, some people say it's 19%, but basically we have a huge portion of our workforce that are in low pay, statistically low pay. One of the worst in the European Union. We've got 40% of young people under 30 in precarious work. And in terms of people with disabilities in the workforce, which I raised today with the Taoiseach, we have 32% of people with disabilities in the workforce in Ireland. The average across Europe is 51%. And the reason for all those things is because of our relatively weak collective bargaining rights in Ireland. It's keeping people locked in low pay. It's keeping people locked in insecure work. It's keeping people with disabilities or other people on the margins of society, at poverty's door. And that is the reason why it has to be a collective endeavour, not just for people in this room, but for people I've spoken to in other rooms, to wake up. Because if you are in insecure work, it leads to other insecurities in your life. Insecure housing, insecure relationships, insecure future. And insecurities that sometimes open the door to the far right, who are really making their noises and their violence and their aggression known in this campaign. I noticed recently in a Fine Gael video about support for business, 15 steps to supporting business. Number 12 was pausing advancements in sick pay. But Minister Donoghue didn't actually have the courage to say the words sick pay out loud. It was just written on a blackboard. So in terms of the transposition of the directive, absolutely we support that. The last thing I'll say is just about the composition of the European various groupings. The Labour Party is a member of the S&D group. We hope to see Nicola Schmidt being the next commissioner. It is the fact that Ursula von der Leyen is holding out the hand of collaboration and coalition to far-right groups across Europe. It's not just that they're racist, it's not just that they are climate change deniers, but they are also vehemently opposed to this type of measure. So in being the second largest group in the European Parliament at the moment, hoping to strengthen it, we certainly will be hoping to unseat Ursula von der Leyen, because that type of coalition is definitely going to do more damage to the European Union, which I would say has been good for Ireland and has been good for workers' rights in Ireland. Thank you.
Thanks, Aodhan. Ciaran?
Thanks very much. It's good to be with you all. And I come to you with my experience of being a legislator in the European Parliament for 5 years and I want to talk a little bit about that. But let me start off by talking about the adequate minimum wage legislation. That legislation has been passed by the European Parliament. It's now up to the Irish Government to implement it. And by November of this year, the work has to start on an action plan for its implementation. And it's crucial that the Irish Government focuses on increasing the participation of workers in trade unions in Ireland, because we are an outlier with a very low level of participation in unions. And it is up to government to help boost that. And I think it's crucial in the years ahead that we do boost that, because without collective bargaining, without working together, it will be very hard to protect the most vulnerable in Irish society. And I think it's crucial that we say that. But on Friday week, the real choice that you have is electing people to serve as lawmakers in Europe. And to me, you have a choice. You have a choice to vote for people who will continue to support workers, who will continue to support a green and just transition for everyone. And that means helping people and helping the most vulnerable in society. So that is one choice. The other choice is to vote for people who are saying press pause on new legislation, who are signing up to austerity for the next 5 years, just at the time when we have to invest in people, we have to invest in workers, and we have to invest in the green transition. And I'm sorry, but Renew Europe, the European People's Party, and, curiously, the Socialists and Democrats signed up to this austerity. The Greens did not. We said to make this transition, you have to invest in people and you have to invest in workers. And I stand over my record over the last 5 years, not just on minimum wage legislation, but on protecting workers who are often precarious, on minimum wage, on ensuring that people get paid paternity leave, maternity leave, and leave if they're victims of domestic violence. We can't press pause on this legislation. We have to keep moving forward. And that's what I will stand for. I sit on the Transport Committee of the Parliament, and I've worked hard to protect workers, whether they're transport workers in aviation or whether they are truck drivers who are entitled to a bed for the night rather than sleeping in the cab. My record of voting in the European Parliament is something I'm quite proud of. And finally, just to look ahead to the next 5 years, because you're electing parliamentarians to serve till the end of the decade. And this has to be the decade of change for the green transition, but it has to be a decade in which we improve the life of workers. And that's what I will move on. I want to see a European Commissioner for Housing to make sure that housing is affordable and accessible to all. I'll leave it at that. I'm sorry for giving a long answer, but I just wanted to put out my pitch for what you're electing for. Thank you.
Thank you. Regina, would you be happy enough to respond there? Like, where would you stand? Really, is probably on union busting. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. First of all, apologies everybody for being late, because not only was I late, I then went to the wrong venue. I was in the Teachers Club earlier on, so apologies. The traffic was mad. I suppose it's easy for me to sit here and say that in the unlikely stereotyped, image of a Fine Gaeler, I'm the daughter of a shop steward in the ESB all his life. When Leo Varadkar appointed me as Minister for Social Welfare in 2017, I asked him to include employment affairs in the portfolio, because it is the way all of the other European countries do it. They don't separate social welfare and employment affairs activation from actually workers' rights. And during my time as that minister, and he said yes, obviously, and during my time as that minister, my track record is that I brought in legislation that banned 0-hour contracts, that introduced banded hour contracts, that increased the minimum wage 4 times in a row, that ensured when people showed up for work, despite being sent home early, as lots of our younger and precarious workers are, they have to get paid for the full shift that they're rostered for, and that's something that's still not happening. I introduced legislation to make sure that tips in our service industry go to the people that earn the tips. So I actually have a track record of delivering in this area. And it's not because I'm a Fine Gaeler, it's because I come from a situation and a family that grew up knowing that you had to fight collectively for what you believed in. And in some instances it's easy because people have good relationships on other work situations, it's not that easy. And so I know how difficult it can be. And that's how I know why it's so important when somebody has the position of delivering and authority or power or whatever we want to call it, that they use it wisely. And I hope I did show my genuine interest in that area for the 4.5 years that I was involved. I also, during COVID, made sure that people had money in their pockets during a time where we were all told to stay home and nobody got paid their wages anymore. And to be fair to the Department of Social Welfare, we turned that around literally in a matter of weeks, something that most of you know was a miracle because nothing happens in a matter of weeks in departments. And I'm very, very grateful that they did do that. So it's easy for me, having sat in the European Council for 4 years, to know the value of European rights and the promises that are made through the directives of the European Council and the trilogues and the Parliament. And I can absolutely assure you that my party, if it's in government in the future, will transpose the directives that have come exactly as they have been negotiated during the trilogues of the European Union. And the only thing I can say to you to show my bona fides is that my track record shows you that I care about this area, I have delivered in this area, and I'll ensure that we continue to do so into the future.
Thank you, Regina. I'm going to take another question from the floor. That lady down at the end there.
That's you.
That's you. Glasses, yeah.
Maeve Richardson, member of SIP2, but I'm also the National Student Voice Organiser at the Irish Second Level Student Union, ISSU. So over the past few years, I've gotten to work and represent students and young people at second level and representing them at third level. Recent research from UCD and Ireland Thinks has shown that the vast majority of young people want to join a trade union and are positively disposed to trade unions and want to improve the workers' rights. But the Respect at Work campaign has highlighted one of the biggest challenges to those young people wanting to unionise, which is union busting and victimisation. So for all of you here who are running for Europe, I want to ask you, as a young person and someone who works with young people who I know from working with want to join a trade union, what will each of you do to ensure that young people and all workers can safely join a trade union without victimisation and targeting?
Thank you, Maeve. I'm actually going back to the candidates now. I'm going to be stricter this time. Aodhan, do you need to go? Or do you want to go first?
No.
Yeah, I mean, I think we give a short answer.
Yeah.
Sorry. 30 seconds. Well, first of all, I believe we need to lower the voting age to 16. Okay, then politicians will take 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds much more seriously. I do have to commend Norma Foley in having the Irish Secondary School Teachers Union at the table when it comes to decision making, but the transposition obviously of the directive is going to be key to that as well. But I do feel that the voice of 16 or 17-year-olds will be taken off that more seriously if they had the vote, and also that ministers in positions of authority, including employment ministers, were able to have them at the table and to change the minimum wage as well for those of that age group as well.
Well done, Aodhan. Ciaran, quicker now.
Yeah, we try and be as quick as Aodhan. Look, I think I will continue to vote for progressive legislation on workers' rights in Europe, but I think it's important that we do what we say. For instance, within my own group, we have no unpaid internships. Things like that send out a clear signal to young people that they are respected, they are wanted, and they are needed. So I think following my words with my deeds is one of the most important things I can do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ciaran. Brendan?
I think it's a scandal that you have to be sacked. Ethel touched on it earlier. That you have to be sacked in this country to get the minimal rights if you're a young worker seeking to join a trade union. And even then, it's incredibly hard to take and win a case. We did it not too long ago in the hospitality and tourism sector, but to prove that a worker is sacked for trade union organisation is incredibly hard. It shouldn't be like that. Workers need to be protected, the unions need to be protected and need to have a right of access. And the word union and the concept of us all just coming together collectively needs to be made normal and commonplace throughout the labour market and throughout politics. There shouldn't be any ideological opposition. We've seen the surveys saying the public want it. There isn't the ideological hostility out there that the vested interests would have you think there are. So across the broad political spectrum and the trade union spectrum, people need to get real and just realise that coming together collectively is a good thing, it's a normal thing elsewhere, and we need to get rid of the stigma that it has for much of the Irish workforce.
Thanks, Brendan. Sinead, do you want to take? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think within the next term of the Parliament, I mean, obviously the directive has now been passed, so it is going to be at domestic level where we're going to see the implementation. And once again, I think it has to be something that the Irish government looks to do with absolute strength in the legal framework that it adopts. And I think some of the things we've just heard about in terms of the Unfair Dismissal Act, but I also think in terms of equality legislation itself, reduction of voting age, but also just within the actual collective bargaining rights itself. And it's also not surprising that there is this upsurge in unionisation within the younger groups, because we know that they are subject to precarity in work disproportionately compared to other age groups. So it's absolutely something, I think, in terms of awareness raising, I think that's really important as well, and mobilisation, just making sure that where that will and that desire to be active as a union member is something that people can fully realise. So that's how I would contribute to it.
Thank you, Sinead. Clare?
Briefly, I think European directives can be an assist, but they're not a substitute to union organisation either, and I think that's an important point to make. A lot of the measures which Regina mentioned that the government brought in were actually brought in as a result of European Union directives, which, in fairness, the government inadequately transposed in a number of instances. So if you like, the Part-Time Workers Directive, which automatically gives workers who are existing workers access to extra hours, was not transposed, and Regina removed amendments put forward by myself and others at the time. There was a clause put in saying there'd be a 12-month review of that. That never happened. So actually we're not even in compliance with the EU directives that are there. There's a lot of stuff that the Irish government could do without having to wait for Europe. So things like increasing the penalties for union busting, making it more aligned with the whistleblowing, so 5 years instead of 2, and things like that, trade union recognition, as I said earlier, right to access. There's nobody tying the Irish government's hands on these things. They could be done anyway. But what was delivered by the movement at that time, and huge pressure around things like tips, which put it onto the agenda with a bit of assistance from the directives. And I think that's the way we need to move forward.
Okay, thanks, Clare. Daithí?
Good, Margaret. Great question. Well done. I think the best defence for any worker is to be in a union, bottom line. It is what protects workers, their families and their communities. I would encourage everybody to be in a union. Everybody. And I think any battles that are won will be won in a coalition of forces, young people, trade unions and elected reps. I honestly believe between that tripartite coalition is what will bring about progressive laws and protected workplaces. I think if you take any one of those away, it won't happen. And this is why I'll be brief in why I think that. If we don't have proper unions organising, demanding, picketing, protesting, educating, they will not apply the pressure on the legislators. If we don't have progressive left-wing legislators working in a coalition of sorts, then the law simply won't be put in place. So we need to have those, and young people need to be the centre of it. We need to make sure that the unions aren't some withering on the vine, are living in the past. We need young people in the unions driving it, showing leadership, taking leadership and being the energy in it. So I think those three sections need to work together. And I certainly want to be central to that. If I get elected, lucky enough and honoured enough to get elected to Europe, I want to be one of those people.
I'm going to.
And then finally, if I'm not elected to Europe, I'll continue being a union activist in defence of those three things anyway.
Thank you, Daithí. Regina, would you like to reply?
Yeah, thanks. I think it's twofold. Like, again, I just reiterate, I have absolutely no problem transposing legislation that comes from Europe that improves workers' rights, and I have a track record of showing you that. But I love the Ireland Thinks poll that says 66% of young people want to join a union. The reality is very different. Like, I have 4 young people at home, and they come home and they talk about how they're being treated in work and frustrations and stuff, and yet they're still afraid to join a union. So I think we need a grassroots, and it's not to be critical, but we need a grassroots campaign to empower them that there's pride actually in being in a union, that you don't need to be afraid. It's not something that, you need to be able to stand up with pride to your employer to say, I have a right to be in the union and that you can't push me around. And I think we need help to do that. The unions need help and support from all of us and probably from government to make sure that they do and young people understand that it is a right for them to be there. And whatever we can do to help, I think that's what we need to do to make sure that they do have the confidence to be able to join.
Thank you, Regina. I'm just going to take one more question from the floor. The gentleman there in the yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mary. My name is Tom Sheehan. I'm rep with the Communications Workers Union. We represent a group of workers in the 999 service. It's a vital public service. It's a state contract delivered by BT. The workers gathered together and organised themselves into the union. They made representations to management, tried to engage with them. BT's response was to call the staff into a group meeting. So union busting is not just done on an individual basis, as in Tom in the video. It's also done on a group basis. And they were told that joining a union is an act of self-harm, and the company could lose the contract as a result. So just to remind you, this is a state contract, a vital public service. It's union bursting on a state contract by a company, a multinational company that will not even recognise the industrial relations machinery of the state, would not go to and engage with that. I think it's scandalous. So my question to the candidates is, the union movement wants to criminalise union busting across Europe, and if you're elected, will you support this effort? Thank you.
Yes or no? Who wants to start? Okay, we'll let...
Yes.
30 seconds? No, I'm going to go 30 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah, 30 seconds. I'm serious at 30 seconds.
Yes. I would support the criminalisation of union busting, and I would also look at the two areas of European legislation where I think we really could make headway on this, in terms of both procurement and EU price competition law, which can favour public services or publicly owned organisations which do have better union protection, and also can reward people within the procurement system if they as employers prove themselves to be positive employers who respect and facilitate union membership within their own workforce.
Thank you, Sinead. Clare, can you do better?
I mean, look, we're all saying there's widespread union busting. We know that that's a fact. So we've had successive governments who were in a position to legislate to deal with the measures that we've just outlined, and they haven't done it. So sending the same people to Europe to do that isn't going to change it either, because European directives are soft touch legislation, really, let's be honest about it. And the terms of the present one is soft touch. The actual content of it will be delivered at government level, at national level. So that's where you need to get stuck in it. But yeah, obviously I do support it. That's my background. I've raised these issues in the Parliament. I've raised trade union issues more in this Parliament than all of the other Dublin MEPs put together.
Okay, so. Thanks, Clare. Daithí.
Three out of the four current MEPs are government parties. And I think they cannot get a get-out-of-jail clause simply because they're in Brussels. If you vote for the same, you get the same response. You need to elect left-wing parties.
Okay, Daithí.
And the final point is public procurement contracts must ensure union recognition and collective bargaining.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Regina.
Tom, first of all, how the 999 workers have been treated is disgraceful. We've raised it in the Sinead on a number of occasions. I don't think Fianna Fáil are here tonight, but Shane Cassells from Navan obviously is very representative of the group of workers that are in Navan. We attempted to try and meet with the employer BT, and we were brushed aside. So we did raise it with the Minister, and we're waiting back for some sort of response. But actually, no disrespect to Daithí, the reason we have the legislation coming from Europe is because of the ministers that we send to the European councils, the commissioners that we send from each country, and the parliamentarians that we have sitting in the Parliament negotiating the directives that come back here that we then do transpose. It's nothing to do without being in government or not being in government. When the legislation is negotiated in the Parliament, it comes back here,
Regina,
and the government has to
close
transpose
down.
it. Sorry, Mary.
Thank you. And I go to Brendan.
Yeah, absolutely. Union busting needs to be criminalised. Just to put it in context, Tory Britain has more trade union rights than we have here. They've got collective bargaining rights. Poor enough, but they have them over there. We have nothing here. I don't accept the argument, to be honest with you, that we can't have legislators here that challenge that. I don't accept the judicially imposed encumbrance on the right to associate. I don't accept that. I think we can do more. But certainly we can look to Europe and we can look to the transposition of this directive. But the directive isn't going to solve everything. We need to criminalise bad practice, and we need an upgrade. And the last thing I'll say on it is the trade union movement themselves, public sector and private sector, need to really have a joint approach on this. In the public sector, to have effective collective bargaining, but they need to stand lock, stock and two shoulders together with their private sector colleagues and demand better here as well as in Europe.
Okay, thanks, Brendan. Aodhan?
Yeah, very quickly, absolutely needs to be criminalised. I believe employers are running the table, you know, on very many aspects of trade union, of the reality of collective bargaining issues in Ireland. I went to work the other day in Leinster House, and all around Leinster House are these new 9% VAT rate posters. I think government has to stop pandering to the interests of those who are low-pay employers. They run the table, and we seem to listen and bend over backwards because we were told that they are the backbone of the Irish economy, but they're also the backbone of the low-pay economy. And I think the lobbying, I understand, in the EU is even 10 times worse than what happens domestically here in Ireland. So I think we have to have parties who are less willing to listen to them and more willing to listen to the workers who are underpaid in the industry.
Aodhan. Ciaran?
Well, Aodhan is right. The amount of lobbying in Europe is extraordinary. And every day of the week you have people knocking on your door. I say to that look at who I've met and what I discussed. I would sit down regularly with the European Transport Workers Federation. I've spoken at their rallies outside of the Parliament, but I've also sat down with them inside to see how we can amend legislation to make sure that it's in favour of workers. That's what you're electing me for, to make laws at a European level. Finally, just coming back to Ireland, I think we should look again at the 1990 Industrial Relations Act. I think it has been used as an impediment to joining unions in the past. I think it needs to be revised. It's over a third of a century old, but that's domestic legislation. My focus is on Europe, and I'm very proud of my record and will continue to fight for workers in the European Parliament. Thank you.
Thanks, Ciaran. Thank you. Just a second, Brendan. Thanks very much for coming along. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers and thanks. Sinead, are you okay still? I have to leave at 7:30. You're okay. Yeah. Do you want to take one more question? No. Claire, you reached on 7:30. Yeah, it's fine. Okay, so I'm going to try and get back time here. So Jerry is dying to get off. Okay, so Jerry McCormick, he's our ICTU European officer, and he's going to talk to us on the European elections manifesto. And I think everyone has a copy of the manifesto, and I will take some questions on that afterwards. And again, it's questions, not a rant. A question. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. I'll be brief. Just to say that the position of the Officer for Europe within Congress is new. It hasn't existed before, which is it's hard to believe, given that we've been in the EU for 50 years, that we don't have a European officer at Congress level. And some of the stuff that's coming across at the hustings is that MEPs are saying, and they're right, is that they don't see Irish trade unions lobbying in Europe. And we need to change that, and it is my intention to do that. My role will be spending most of my time in Brussels. I will be meeting with the MEPs who are here or who will be elected from here and around the other constituencies. I intend to spend as much time with them, including other MEPs, and I will hold them to account. Because if they sign up to the pledges, both of these pledges, I intend to make sure every month I'll be reporting back to the executive, the Congress executive, to make sure that those pledges have been followed through and that the membership of each of the affiliates will know what our MEPs are doing for workers' rights. It's very important. Just a couple of things on the conversation that has been taking place. The directive that's currently been transposed into Irish law, just for Regina's benefit, and I'm delighted to see that she's here because she's the only Fine Gael candidate that has turned up. So far in all of the hustings. But the directive is now falling on choppy waters. The government have decided that they do not need to bring in primary legislation to transpose it into Irish law, which is absolutely astounding. There's a meeting of the social partners at the end of June. And the truth is that meeting may decide whether the transposition will have the backing of the Congress, because it's not looking very like it at the moment. And at the same time, I think Aodhan mentioned it, at the same meetings I attended as part of when I was Deputy General Secretary at SIPTU, we had the government then saying to us that the hospitality industry, which has been whinging with their 9% and all other sorts of stuff, and have been whinging for the last number of months, and what they're saying is untrue. there has been a 16% increase in employment across that industry. And yet here we are handing them handfuls of money. And the truth is that that is the base, and it's particularly, and I just say this to Regina, Fine Gael who's driving that agenda, because that's who Fine Gael are aligned to. They're not allied to workers. They never have been and never will be. So it's a shame, I have to say. But we intend to make sure that they follow through with their promises. We will ask them to sign up to pledge it. You don't physically have to sign up to it. All of the other candidates who attended the hustings have signed up to it, and we will be advising the affiliates of those who have done. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. So I'm not going to take questions from the floor because I'm actually just trying to get back time. So, Regina, would you like to start the response to that?
Yeah, sure. So, first of all, Jerry, good luck with the job. If I'm elected, I look forward to working with you and for you. The one thing I will say, and I'm not 100% sure on this, is that maybe primary legislation isn't needed. Maybe we can transpose the directive by statutory instrument. I'm happy to go and check that in the morning, which is equally as effective. It's just a faster route and it doesn't take 2 years to go through the Parliament. So let me check that and come back to you. But to say honestly that Fine Gael is not a party that, you know, really thinks a lot of workers' rights, I don't think is fair. I'm the one that drafted the legislation for TIPS. We're the ones that brought in paid parental leave. We're the ones that brought in paternity leave. Or we're the ones that brought in the illness payment. We're the one, you know. So there's a long list of things that we've tried to do. And maybe Claire's right. Maybe we haven't done everything that we're supposed to do. But I tell you, we did a hell of a lot more than the Labour Minister did in the previous 5 years before I was the Minister for Employment Affairs. So I think my track record speaks for itself.
Thank you. Claire, do you want to respond? Oh, no, sorry, Daly. Sorry.
Thanks, yeah. Listen, good luck. I look forward to being held to account by the unions. I think that will make it far more effective and efficient for all of us. And I look forward to being held to account and to a high standard by the trade unions. That's hugely important. And to be briefed both in Brussels and Dublin, if I'm lucky enough to be elected. This is fantastic. Well done. I think I'm happy to support it 100% and develop it. I think it needs to be a living document. I think it might need to be developed over the 5 years and reflect the politics of Europe. I think this is the bulwark against fascism and racism. And I'll be honest, because that's how your opening sentence is. 2004 European elections are the most important in many years. They are for loads of reasons, for this and also for maintaining and defending democracy and progressive politics. I'll support this. I'll work with you. I look forward to working with you, being held to account and reporting back here as often as necessary.
Okay, thanks, Daithí. Claire?
I mean, I don't need to tell people here that life is obviously very difficult for people in Ireland in terms of access and housing, in accessing work, in terms of getting around this city and delivering. And I think the manifesto actually does touch on a lot of the key issues that are there. But one of the things that will hamstring us from addressing them is the state aid rules, which was one of the last acts of the current European Parliament mandate, was to reinstate those state aid rules, which will prevent us from dealing with public housing, public transport and all of these measures, and critically the issue you've highlighted of climate change and a just transition. Because there is a feeling, and rightly so, by a lot of workers in this state, that ordinary people are being asked to carry the can of the environmental crisis while the big corporate sectors are being literally ignored and let off scot-free, even though they are the ones causing the problem. And for example, militarisation and the military carbon footprint is excluded from any measure at all. It's greater than aviation and shipping put together, and we don't calculate it. Yet people are queuing up outside these bins every day that don't work with their plastic recycling stuff. Why didn't they impose a tax on the producers of that plastic? So I'm very happy to work on those measures. I think we will only deliver on what's in the manifesto through stronger trade unions and the legislation that we mentioned earlier. It's the critical absence of a lot of the division that we see in society, is that we don't have ordinary working people organised collectively. That would cut across so much. Happy to continue to do that. In the current mandate, I've brought delegations over of trade union representatives, linked them in with other international organisations, and like Ciaran said, on the committees that we're on, we develop close links in those areas. So I too was on transport, would have a very close relationship with the European Cockpit Association, with the IALPA and the other sectors in aviation in particular. And that's how you feed in to the legislative bits that are there early on, is by that cooperation. So Jerry's point is right there. We need to do that more from Ireland.
Thanks, Claire. Sinead?
Thanks a million, and thanks for that, Jerry, and best of luck in the role. If I am lucky enough to be selected by Dublin as your representative, I really welcome that accountability. And the voices of this movement and those movements that represent the social partners are the voices that I want to listen to, because I believe that we need, as you have outlined in this manifesto, to bring the European Union back to the social European Union that it started as and where we all want to see it back to. Reading this manifesto, I think you've just done an incredible job in a very succinct format to capture so many pertinent issues. It honestly reads like my inner campaign monologue, my inner voice, because there's so many parts of it that I really am so passionate about advancing if I'm lucky enough to be elected as your MEP. I mentioned my former role as Chief Commissioner of the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission, and discrimination is something that I am really, really passionate about fighting back against, and I think that's something that I would love to do as an MEP. I also think my mix of tech sector background and human rights really places me very well to deal with the labour displacement that we are all going to see come from artificial intelligence, automation more broadly, and it's an area that I'm really, really keen to get stuck into over in Brussels. I mean, I think at the moment we're grappling with it and nobody's talking about the positive elements of AI, but nobody really is truly speaking bravely about that labour displacement. So I think we need to be looking at basic income, we need to be looking at 4-day weeks and making sure that that just transition that is in the green space is also coupled with the digital fourth information revolution that we're experiencing and what it's going to mean for workers across our continent. So I absolutely commend this manifesto and I will absolutely be taking it as viable if I'm sent over to Brussels.
Thank you, Sinead. Thank you.
Yeah. Right. Fine Gael want to impress us with their workers' rights credentials, and they should change their attack on sick pay, which disproportionately hurts women, disproportionately hurts migrants, and disproportionately hurts young people. And we'd all be impressed, and that's something that they could do tomorrow. On the manifesto, absolutely fundamentally support it. As I said, I want to be, if elected, a member of the S&D group in the European Parliament, which is currently the second most powerful group or biggest group in the European Parliament. I want to touch on something that Daithí said, and I want to agree with him. If I was a low-pay employer, if I was one of the 1% of wage earners in this country, if I was a tax exile, I would want everybody in this country talking about immigration. That's what I'd want. And when we get sucked into that, that's when workers lose. That's when society loses. That's when the economy loses. That's when we all lose. I have a deep concern about the narrative that is happening out there. I have a deep concern about the moving of some parties to the right to pander to this stuff. It's not something that the Labour Party are doing at all. And it's something that we're standing firm on because, as I said earlier, it starts with attacking immigrants and racism. It moves on to climate change denial. It then moves on to attacking workers' rights. And all of it is benefiting those at the top who want to keep all of us down. So what I would say, there's a lot we can achieve together. But I don't say these things just in this room. I said it to IBEC, I said it at the Sandyford Business District, Hustings as well. I'm consistent at this, and I think we have a potential to achieve something if we have a consistency of our message.
Yeah. Thank you. Ciaran? And brief.
Yeah. One of the biggest meetings in the European Parliament over the last 6 months was a hustings of the trade unions of Europe, and I think there was probably 300 MEPs in the room. It was a really impressive turnout, and it shows that there is strong support for unions within many parts of the European Parliament. Most, but not all, of the larger parties were there. Aodhan's party absolutely was there. But I think it is an important time to stand up for the rights of workers in Europe. Some of the people here have alluded to the threats to not just democracy, but to justice in Europe. And it is a difficult time in Europe. There's a major war raging on European soil. There is a dictator who is very happy for Europe to having a row about migration. And it's important to stand up to Russia, but also to stand up for workers and to ensure that we have a just transition. And we are living through the middle of what I call a gentle revolution. It's changing the transport we use, the energy we use, the food we eat, the buildings we live in. And we have to make sure that vulnerable people are protected in this transition. And I've worked hard to do that. I've been working on a greener buildings law for the last few years. And I'm saying, look, if you renovate a building, the tenants have to be protected. They can't be evicted. Things like that make a difference to ordinary people's lives in Europe. And I'm very proud of my record on that, and I will continue to stand up for both the workers and the most vulnerable people in Europe. And I think we have to use the Just Transition Fund, the Climate Social Fund, and other monies to make sure that the vulnerable are protected. Thank you.
Thank you, Ciaran. And what I'm actually going to do now is we're actually going to stick to the time, okay? So we're going to ask the candidates if you can you hear me okay? So we're going to actually ask you, will you sign the Respect at Work pledge? And we'll be doing a short video messaging you with your own message into it, and we're doing that upstairs. So if you go with, put up your hands there, boys. So if you follow them, if you have time for and no, once again, yeah, I just really want to thank everyone for coming along here tonight, especially the candidates, and we really appreciate you giving the time, and up the workers, and best of luck. Thank you.